really understand why anyone thinks anything I do is a major achievement, because I generally love every part of my life, and to me it doesn't seem like work. It's something that's enjoyable. I look forward to. That way of approaching the world is seeing the world in a very positive way and being happy with everybody and speaking to everyone. It's been a good thing.
Thank you for welcoming into the CAB. So now I'm learning the acronyms, but not the names anymore.
Clinical Academic Building.
Clinical Academic Building. Yeah. This is where I come to get my care. Mm-hmm. Tell me a bit more what happens in this building, and then this is part of my introduction to the university.
This includes both the dean's office on the first floor and some of the other administrative offices for the medical school. And then there are clinics in many of the departments here, and then some of the academic offices of some departments, like here it's medicine and pediatrics, and then laboratories. And so we do clinical laboratory science in this building as well. So this is one of several buildings that the medical school, Robert Johnson Medical School, has in the Brunswick area, and it's full of scientists, full of clinicians, and full of great creativity.
Well, this is 7 floors it sounds like it's packed to the gills.
Yes.
And so a casual user like me walks in and I'm just trying to see my doc, and I'm completely unaware that all these other things are happening at the same site.
Yep.
If you had a guess about, I guess, the public awareness of what's going on, what would you think?
The public's not aware at all. And, if you come down here, you see the medical school and you see the hospital and you see some of the clinical buildings, and the public actually sees this all as one medical complex, which it is. Mm-hmm. And so I think all of us have to work together to provide that image to the public. The public comes into the building. First of all, when they come to this building, they see this big sign, Robert Wood Johnson Medical School, and they think that's me. And so sometimes since my name is...
Man, you stole the joke I was going to come to later on, but that's okay.
And so actually one patient knocked on my door and said, I want to meet Robert Wood Johnson. But so the public doesn't know. They know it's a place they come to get health care, and that's about it. But they don't know the science. Mm-hmm. And what the most important thing that happens in all of our buildings is actually the science, because that's the thing that has the greatest impact on healthcare eventually in the future.
One of the challenges we're talking about is the ways in which the public does or doesn't know, in this case maybe doesn't know quite a bit, about the total world of academic medicine. Yeah. Part of the challenge is how do you tell your story? Yeah. And that's part of a Rutgers challenge too. Right. And that's part of what we're trying to solve with these interviews.
Right. And part of the complexity is how we're different than everybody else. Mm-hmm. Why is an academic health center different than a community health center? And what types of care and what's the long-term benefit? Now, one of the things we saw most recently in the COVID pandemic is it was the academic health centers that produced the vaccines, that produced the tests, that gave the highest level of care. And in those types of situations, they provide the public with the greatest benefit.
And yet the public isn't fully aware.
Exactly.
I mean, that's probably being generous, as a matter of fact. I mean, incredible, great breakthrough work has been happening at Rutgers, as it should be, as it's supposed to happen. And we may or may not come back to this, but I want to hear about your story. Mm-hmm. So you've been at Rutgers for more than a minute. Mm-hmm. You have done a couple of important things. Mm-hmm. And the craziest thing, I mean this in the best way, is that you are the, I think, first and only person to serve as dean of 2 medical schools at the same time. Yeah. And you're not wearing your cape today. So what's going on?
Well, you forgot to also take care of patients, but that's
and you take care of patients. You continue the practice. So tell us a bit about how, I mean, this could not have been your plan when you were starting out on your journey towards medical school.
No. My journey toward medical school started when I was either 9 or 10 years of age. I was at a meeting at church, and a youth group on a Saturday afternoon, and the person who was leading the discussion said, let's go around and just tell everybody what you want to be. So I said, I want to be a doctor. I don't know where that came from. I said, I just want to be a doctor. In fact, at the time, I think I wanted to be a missionary doctor. I wanted to be like Albert Schweitzer.
Okay.
But the missionary part sort of continued since I'm so much involved in the church, but the doctor part is the part that really stuck. And so that's when the journey started.
At 8 or 9. I doubt we've ever talked about this. No reason we would have. But I was going to be a doctor of medicine as well, a sports orthopedic surgeon. Don't know where the idea came from. Then calculus in my freshman year reminded me that I wasn't very good at science. So I thought that might be kind of a difficult road to go down. But clearly, you had this idea.
Right.
The spirit moved you, if you will, 8 or 9. And I mean, what does a 9-year-old do to continue down that path, or is it just part of your vision, or what was it?
It's just part of the vision. So one thing that's important, is even important today, is that my thought was endorsed. It's endorsed by the important other individuals in my life. So my parents endorsed it, cousins, aunts and uncles, people in the church, people in the community, even people in high school. So if I was told over and over again, you're going to be a doctor. Now just imagine what would have happened if someone said, no, you can't do that. It was not endorsed. And so it's an important lesson for parents. I always talk to them about that. You have to really be positive with your kids about what they want to do. But in any case, that was it. It was just stayed there. I did lots of other things too. I was president of the Latin Club, and I was a young Republican for a very short period of time, and I campaigned for Nelson Rockefeller. And then the Republicans nominated Barry Goldwater, and I switched and became a young Democrat. I did some civil rights stuff, and I was even in college. I was in the SDS, and so I did all of those types of things.
Wait a second. I'm sorry. Just wait a second. We're here to talk about you and your medical journey, but I know a little bit about political history. Young Republicans to young Democrats to SDS. That is not a typical trajectory.
No, but you remember, this is the 60s.
Okay. Did you know what kind of medicine you wanted to get into?
No. It's interesting you mentioned sports medicine. For a while I thought maybe sports medicine, but the only idea was doctor. And so then I applied to medical school at the end of college and just came to actually New Jersey because that's the school that gave me the most money. The scholarship.
It's practical.
And my concept of what I wanted to do in medicine was really all over the place, because it was initially orthopedic surgery and sports medicine until I actually went to the OR and was bored to death. And then And then after 2 years of medical school, I spent a summer working at a hospital, and I thought it's just to make money, and I thought it was going to be assigned to adult medicine, and the secretary, the chairman of medicine said, no, you look like you should go into pediatrics, and so that's how I ended up in pediatrics. I found a pediatric cardiac surgeon who would really impress me, and I followed him around all the time, and I actually stuck with that even through into medical school and to end pediatric residency. And I actually applied for a fellowship in pediatric cardiology at NYU, got in. Then the spring before I was supposed to go, I read an article about adolescent medicine. That was a new field, and it just clicked. I said, this is what I really want to do. And I wrote to the chair of pediatric cardiology and told I wasn't coming, and I thought I'd have to spend a year doing something else, and it just so happens that there was an adolescent medicine fellowship at NYU as well, and I got into that and did that instead.
Must have been one heck of an article, first of all, that clicked with you.
But you know what it was? When I look back, the thing I liked about pediatric cardiology was they saw teenagers.
Interesting.
And pediatrics stopped at 12 in those days, but they saw teenagers. And even when I was in a pediatric residency, I used to go over to the adult side and see teenagers over there. So it was all there.
Something in you. And then, I get it. I mean, people have asked me why or how I got into administration. The one thing I discovered is how much I enjoyed helping people out. I mean, there's something absolutely fascinating from a developmental standpoint for me with that age population. And then, off and running. So you've been at Rutgers for how long now?
Well, it's since 2013, but of course before that it was from 70 well, I went to medical school in '68.
Mm-hmm.
So the school that became Rutgers was all the way back then, so over 50 years.
So you got to explain this to the viewers. I mean,
Yeah.
give me the this is almost a hysterical sentence. Give me the 30 seconds on the how we get to Rutgers Medicine now.
Well, the school originally was in Jersey City,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a College of Medicine, Dentistry in New Jersey, and it was a dental school and a medical school. The Hudson County Medical Society threw the school out of the hospital, and the state decided to build the school in Newark.
Mm-hmm.
And that became the College of Medicine, Dentistry in Jersey, which eventually became the University of Medicine, Dentistry, New Jersey. You had all the other pieces.
UMDNJ.
UMDNJ.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's where I came. When I finished my residency and fellowship in adolescent medicine, I came there in 1976 to start to create the Division of Adolescent Medicine and stayed there throughout. Then in 2010, 11, there were all these thoughts that the state had about combining UMDNJ with Rutgers.
Mm-hmm.
And that in itself is
That's
this is New Jersey,
yeah,
lots of politics,
lots
but
of
eventually
politics.
in 2013, UMDNJ went away and we became part of Rutgers.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where we are now.
So that's actually really, I was joking about 30 seconds, but you probably did it in 45. That's impressive all the same. UMDNJ still cast a long shadow in terms of people's memories and such, but now it's Rutgers.
Yes.
And what do you see as the benefit of, you represent Rutgers Medicine in so many ways.
Right.
Why is this a great thing?
Well, there are lots of things.
Okay.
We can't deny the name is
Mm-hmm.
important. UMDNJ, for a long time, I was very much a part of this, became a toxic name because of some of the problems that occurred.
Okay.
And it was difficult to explain that to everyone. Rutgers is a name that the world recognizes, and whenever I go to meetings and say I'm from Rutgers, everyone knows exactly what that is. They don't know what UMDNJ was. In addition to that, however, and this is something I didn't know at the time, was there's a real benefit in being part of a university as opposed to just a health science university.
Mm-hmm.
It's my whole career, except for the time I was at NYU, was in a facility that only thought about healthcare and health science and biological sciences. Rutgers has everything you can imagine. It's part of Rutgers. And what's happening now, what's happened over the last, I guess, almost 10 years, is that, at least for myself, I've seen the advantage of meeting other people in other areas.
Right.
Like, for example, I didn't know the history was a field you could go into.
Ouch.
but if you think of it, there's a way in which history and the social sciences part of medicine are very important. Engineering is a very important part. I've learned as I've done more work about the design of cities and all that, and how that's related to healthcare and health outcomes. And so that's another thing. So it really has begun to broaden the way in which the people in my area look at everything else. So I think that's very important. I think as we go forward, even more things will. There's even a big advantage to having sports teams. Like, we never had that as part of what we did, but there is that connection. So it's very important.
This is music to my ears, because I really do believe the incredible power of a complex university, which can be a headache to manage, but there's the power in someone in adolescent expertise, talking with somebody with design thinking, talking with somebody who's an engineer, talking with somebody who's a philosopher, because you come with your different training and sensibility, you're handed a complicated situation, and you're going to get a better answer.
Yeah.
Now, it'll be harder to get there probably, but you're going to get a better answer from that.
Well, one of the other things that's real important is business. Healthcare is not just providing care anymore. It is a huge business. And there's a big advantage to having a business school, like a world-class business school, that understands things like supply chain.
Yes.
Like I've learned as the dean now, and with all of these schools, that's really important. I didn't even know what it was until then, but to have that available to us, and the other way around too, because the business school has started a line in health science, so it's very important.
This has been the way with the future for a while now,
Yeah.
10, 15 years, but boy, it's really taking off in really exciting ways. You're the dean, and I happen to know you're African American. You don't hide that fact. So, I mean, we spent 0 moments talking about any aspect of your social identity beyond your curiosity, frankly, until this time.
Mm-hmm.
You spent your high school years in White Plains, New York. Not, thinking backwards to when you were that age, not the most diverse place on the planet.
Oh, yeah.
I'm thinking here that academic medicine, not the most diverse place on the planet in the early 70s.
Right.
And now you're the dean of a major academic center.
Right.
What kind of hurdles did you encounter along the way? What kind of opportunities did you encounter along the way?
Well, I'll tell you the other part of the story.
Yes.
I was born in Spartanburg, South Carolina, in 1946.
Okay.
And I went to.
Oh, see, that's just the whole story right there.
I went to segregated schools.
Yes.
Marriage Wright Elementary School until I was in the 5th grade. My family moved from Spartanburg, South Carolina to White Plains, New York. And in one day, I went from a segregated elementary school to Post Road Elementary School in White Plains, where I was the only black student in the whole school. And
that's culture shock on many levels.
Then I went to Battle Hill Middle School, and there were a few other black students. And then in high school, White Plains High School, we had homogeneous grouping, which is, back in those days, the 60s, people were grouped by their intellect. So I was usually the only black student in all of my classes.
Mm-hmm.
There were black kids that I saw in the church, but in my educational environment, I was the only black student.
Mm-hmm.
In all the organizations I was in, I was usually the only black student. I said I was president of the Latin Club. Well, I was the only black student there, I was president of that. And in those political activities, except for the civil rights ones, I was primarily the only black student.
Mm-hmm.
And in college, same thing. And in medical school, same thing. So hurdles, whenever I tell that story, kids today said, that must have been really difficult. And actually it wasn't. I'll tell you the reason it wasn't, because I was the only one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was the exception to the rule. And so I was pretty accepted by everybody.
Right.
I didn't have anything. And I campaigned as a Republican for Nelson Rockefeller and Jake Javits. Well, they were liberals and civil rights leaders. And so so it wasn't that much of a problem until I remember in college someone said to me, "Isn't this a difficult thing for you?" And I think that was the only time I began to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it just flowed.
Yes.
And was not that big of an issue. But I think that it's made me much more aware today of the importance of diversity. Because I grew up in a non-diverse world where I was the diversity. Mm-hmm. And diversity, in order to be beneficial, had to be more than just one person.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, with just one person, you were not a threat to the system because you were a manageable population in terms of size. I've been asked more than a few times, as you won't be surprised, this has been your life as well. What's it like to be the first X, Y, or Z? Now, I'm younger than you by a little bit, but when I've always, in my administrative roles, have been the first black in these particular roles. And I realized very quickly, given my age, given where society was, I was likely always going to be the first black in these kinds of roles. Okay, that's a fact I can't do anything about.
Right.
But there does seem to be an expectation that I'm transferring now to you, are going to be different. If only because of the way you look. I'm not saying this is fair. I'm not even saying it's reasonable, but it's a fact. So how do you navigate? Well, geez, Dr. Johnson, I thought you were going to be different. Or Dr. Johnson or Dean Johnson, what are you going to do that's going to change the nature of how we do our work at the school?
Well, for one thing, no one ever asked me that.
Oh, okay. Maybe just ask me.
One of the good things about being a dean, no one asks you uncomfortable questions. but I think there is the expectation there, and for me, it's been sort of my life. I've always been involved in the community, and the community has looked at me as the representative of its Africanness or blackness within the institution. And the community has always, for me, been something that supported me and encouraged me. And And I think that just my presence there has made the difference. In fact, some people have told me that. Some of the people who work in a medical school in Newark. I remember there was one lady who was a cleaning lady, and she and I always speak to her, and she says, we're really proud of you, and we're proud. We feel better because of you and where you are, and that's that representativeness, and the fact that some of us are in that office or in the leadership is really important. Now you sometimes have to be really faithful to that, and sometimes you have to make decisions that are not going to be looked at as popular decisions. Yes. And I've had that. I'm sure you've had that too.
Once or twice.
Yes. Once or twice. But then you have to say, well, I have integrity and I understand both sides, but this is a decision we have to make, and I'm making this decision because it's the right thing to do, not because I'm favoring one side or another. And that's been the way I've pretty much marshaled. I've also, made sure that lots of things are done that support it. When I was the only black student in medical school, I led a battle to increase the number of minority students in medical school, and that happened. And so I think that it's a balancing act, but I don't think it's one that, at least for me, it's very comfortable. Maybe it's comfortable because I've done it for so long, but it's one of the things that I spend a lot of time doing is talking to young black medical students about how do you walk through this. And one of the things you can't do is you can't forget who you are and the burden that you carry, but at the same time you can't be fooled by how easy it might be.
Right.
And,
right. I mean, this is just as a community supported you and brought you along in so many different moments. It sounds like you've committed yourself in those same moments to doing that for other people, that you, in a sense, are the figurative community for these other people. And I think this is one of the really important interventions, I'll call it, that people who are the first of whatever it is of their quote type to be in position of authority, one of the things that I think in some ways they may be tasked to do, whether it's fair or not, or one thing they may aspire to do, is to say excellence can be found everywhere. Something I've felt my entire life. Excellence can be found everywhere. It's just that people are not conditioned to look for that excellence. And you grew up, in Spartanburg, South Carolina, in a segregated school system, which for many people might automatically say, oh, poor guy.
Yeah.
You might have, I don't know what your school system's like, but you may have had an excellent school system. You may have had amazing teachers. Yeah. But there's the presumption there, right? Yeah. That suggests that excellence couldn't be there. Well, excellence was there. Right. If in nobody else, it was in you, and your really focused commitment to move along and to become the double dean. One of the big challenges that I've encountered in my career is something you've been doing in your career as well, is finding a way to keep the door open. Finding a way to find that, encourage others to find that excellence, being as a support for other people. And this is one of the things that's really important to me about the idea of a beloved community. Right. But you said something else that's important thinking of the beloved community is not just about finding future Dr. Johnsons or Professor Holloways. Said you talked about you have a relationship with what I will call intentionally, this sounds crude, the invisible people. The folks who are doing the work on a daily basis, keeping our spaces clean, keeping the grounds maintained, making sure the building's running. That too often we don't know their names. We don't know their stories. We don't even really know what they do until they don't do it, and then we get angry. That's something that I find deeply disturbing in our society. But you've made it a point that you've made these connections, and I do think that's a difference that you bring because of your experiences. And I dare say the way you were raised too, having never met your parents or never met your community. That's a really important differentiator.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And for me, it's been a big part of my religion. So I'm a Baptist. I'm a Baptist deacon. I'm very active in the church, and so our religion says you have to love everybody, and that's the way I try to live. And I don't see myself as more important than anyone else. And that's it's funny. That's one of the things people ask me about a lot. So you're this big famous person, and I'm getting a Lifetime Achievement Award. In fact, someone interviewed me because of this Lifetime Achievement Award, and I said, I don't understand why anyone thinks anything I do is a major achievement, because I've generally loved every part of my life, and to me it doesn't seem like work. It's something that's enjoyable. I look forward to, and that way of approaching the world is seeing the world in a very positive way and being happy with everybody and speaking to everyone. It's been a good thing, you know.
I mean, that's a blessing.
Yeah,
first of all.
Sure is.
But it, you know, for academic, administrative business leaders, that's also a lesson plan, I think.
Yeah.
You know, to find joy in the work.
Yeah.
Hopefully, where work is joy.
Yeah.
But also to bring everybody else along.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody.
Yeah.
That's really critical.
Yeah.
You've been in some form of Rutgers, let's call it, you know, extending backwards for decades now.
Right.
Is there something that a new person who just showed up, let's say in the middle of a pandemic, needs to know about this institution?
Well, I'm learning something new about Rutgers every single day.
Oh, so all right. So that means for as long as I'm going to be here, I'll always be climbing this mountain of information.
Exactly, because
that's encouraging.
There are so many. Well, it's a wonderful thing though, because there's so many people here with all sorts of ideas, and the university allows them to take those ideas and form them into real things, and that's very important. Now the problem is that and we're in pieces and isolated somewhat. So I'm really isolated because I got 2 medical schools, and I know the dental school, the nursing school, and health-related professions. I know a few of the other deans of some of the non-science schools, but that's about it. I don't know everybody else. And it's important to get to do that. And one of the things that we used to do is the deans used to all have dinner together. Once a month. I think it was a very important thing to do to get to know these other people. But even within some of the other non-science schools, there are other pieces. And so that's one of the things to get to know. And the other thing is that as your career develops, if you need something, if you need to learn something, it's probably already here. And, you know, I mentioned this design of cities. I was on some work I used to do at the CDC when we were looking at design of communities and how important it is for the health of individuals. And someone said, well, someone needs to find out something about sidewalks. And they turned to me and said, Bob, you know, Rutgers is the leading authority on design of sidewalks and its health benefit. I said, I never knew that at all, but
awesome.
it was already here. And so that's one of the things that is exciting about being in a place like this, and that everyone is open to you. It's not that people are closed off. They love to be engaged with you.
People have been so eager to help teach me.
Yeah.
They've been eager to share their enthusiasm for their job. They've been eager. Now, some people have problems and some people have complaints. That's part of the job. But I've been warmed by others' enthusiasm and wanting to share their Rutgers experience. So I'm grateful that you shared yours with me on this occasion. So I've been asking you lots of questions. Fair play, you get to ask me one.
One question?
Well, maybe 2. Do you have any questions for me?
Full disclosure, I was on the search committee, so I got a chance to ask
Yes,
you
you were.
lots of questions.
See, I can ask you even more questions. What is it you liked about me? But I'm not going to do that.
Well, you know, I think that when you came before us, the idea of a historian running the university was something I had not thought about, you know, and the way your take on history and how important it is and how it fits, and then how it connects to everything else was very important to me. You know, you were the first person that talked to me about the legacy of slavery and how that actually has an impact today. And so I think that those nuances are really important for us, because it also has an impact on the way we teach things.
Yes.
and how the issues we have today. And I think what most people do is they think, well, what we have today is not connected to anything in the past. In fact, the pandemic and why why it's worse in minority communities. It's directly related to 500 years ago. And so those strains and how those things get pulled together, and I think you have a great opportunity to help us with that.
Having humanists run research universities is becoming more rare, that's for sure, as people look for folks with a disciplinary background, engineers, let's say, people in medicine, where they work in complex systems. And so there's the presumption that they are the ones best suited to help manage a complex system. But trying to understand human behavior in the past, in a different context, is about complex systems and how they are refractions of how we live our life today, et cetera. So I'm rooting for all the historians and humanists out there, because I think we have something important to say. I know it's a trite saying, but if we don't pay attention to the past, we're bound to repeat it. And this is why historians will always matter, because we need to keep reminding people, this has happened before, and let's try to learn something from it. We are in a very different age now in terms of the roles and responsibilities of universities, and in terms of the daily life of our community. The university is always a place to learn, and maybe that's the biggest gift of all. Thank you so much for your time. It's an absolute pleasure, as I knew it would be.